It's the election season, getting ready for the fall elections, and joining me in studio, one of the candidates who's running in this upcoming vote. That's Robert McSeveney, who is our Chelan County Superior Court judge, recently appointed by Governor Jay Inslee, and now he's looking to be retained as our Chelan County Superior Court judge. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Your Honor, let's talk about your experience, and first of all, what brought you to Wenatchee, and a little bit about your background in the legal profession.
Sure. Well, I have a very diverse background. I was a Bellevue police officer for almost 10 years, and then I went to law school. Once I completed law school, the city recruited me back to be one of the prosecutors in the city attorney's office, and then I moved to be representing the city of Bellevue in litigation in state and federal courts. And then I went out and started my own law practice. But more and more I was asked to fill in for the judges as a pro tem judge in the King County District Court. So I probably went to 6 or 8 of those courts on a fairly routine basis. And then I was hired by the city of Kent and also by Bothell to start 2 courts. So I started those 2 courts from the ground up, set the policies and procedures, and was a judge in Kent for about 17 years. I was then hired by the Department of Justice to be a U.S. immigration judge appointed by the U.S. Attorney General. And I spent a little over 5 years in that capacity down in San Diego. And I was doing what I consider hardball cases, detained criminal aliens, and I was also the mental health judge for the U.S. immigration courts, the only judge in the country hearing mentally ill cases from the Ninth Circuit, which involves 8 states. So if somebody in Tacoma, that's a detained facility, was mentally ill, they packed them up, sent them to me. So those protocols that were developed there are now being used nationwide, so I'm very proud of the work I did there.
So you have experience both on both sides of the bar, as an attorney, as a judge, and as a law enforcement officer. That gives you pretty much a broad perspective, I guess, on legal matters. Yes,
and that helps being a judge, understanding from the initial law enforcement stage, perhaps the arrest or the investigation, all the way through the prosecution and the adjudication of the case in the courts.
Where did you go to school?
I went to high school, Tye High School down by the airport, and then while I was a police officer, I went full-time to Seattle University. And then I quit and went to law school full-time. At that time it was University of Puget Sound, now it's Seattle University.
I think I'd ask you, because with your background both as a police officer, attorney, and a judge, we're living in different times, and there seems to be a war, or at least law enforcement increasingly finds itself in the crosshairs. I think public opinion has changed a little bit. I think. How do you feel about that at this point in time, and really the kind of negative connotation that comes with being a policeman right now?
Well, as they say, it's an endless, thankless job. And that was a saying that was used when I was an officer, and I think it still applies today. On the other hand, there are extremely dedicated and qualified officers in my career, and also, I believe, currently. The officers, I think, these days are highly trained, probably better training than we had, because the community's changed, the nature of the offenses changed, with all the drug law violations, and the cameras and the recording equipment. There has to be a cognizance of the fact that people will armchair what the police officer does in every case for the most part. But I think it's still very professional. It's an honorable profession. I commend the officers out there for what they do. In any given moment, they may be called to a horrific scene or be involved in an arrest or a firefight, protecting themselves and others. So it's still a good job.
So what are your thoughts about the media's coverage of law enforcement and, well, most notably, police interactions?
I think it depends on the media. Some media outlets, I think, are perhaps more fair, more objective, and I think that would be the goal of good journalism and things like that. Not every police officer is well-trained and reacts properly to whatever situation it may be. I think if the media is fair, covering both sides of it, then I think that's the best you can expect.
You know, there are some questions that I have. I've covered trials, many court proceedings in my career as a broadcast journalist. But I often had questions about why you do what you do as a judge and how you do it. So I've drafted a couple of questions here that kind of fit that mold in terms of a question. What criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or even affirm sentences outside of a standard range?
Well, Washington has a determinative sentence structure. So, for example, there might be a particular crime that gives the judge discretion to impose 60 days in jail up to 9 months in jail. And typically, most of the time, sentences are imposed there. But there might be a criteria that might warrant an exceptional high or an exceptional low. For example, let's just say with all the media attention and when you're dealing with young people, there's this whole discussion about the brain isn't fully developed until a person is perhaps 23 to 25 years of age.
Or in my case, 67.
67, yeah, and you'll be there at 70. But, and so there's this body of law that allows the court to look at youth as a component in considering an exceptional sentence down. There's certainly other criteria that needs to be considered. The state law, the Sentencing Reform Act, does list various things that the court can consider. The nature of the offense, any mitigating factors, any corrective action and things that may have been taken by the defendant. There's a whole host of things. But exceptional sentence above can be, as you could expect, aggravating factors, the nature of the crime. It's all set out typically in statute. Okay. But the court's not bound to that, but there can be other factors. But those generally are the factors the judge would consider.
And it's based on each individual case, I suppose.
Correct.
Yeah. Same hold true then for when you're setting bail amounts and that type of thing?
For the most part, when I handle preliminary hearings, I'm obligated to first find probable cause, whether it exists or not, and then at some point there may be a request by the government for bail. In some cases, the state is asking simply the person be released on their promise to appear. In other cases, given their criminal history, I typically look at have they appeared at their court dates? There's other factors. Will they in any way interfere with the administration of justice? Will they commit new crimes? Those are all components. And so we usually have a criminal history. We have some idea of what their record is, if they fail to appear, if there's warrant history. And we'll hear information from the state. And then if the defendant has a lawyer, hear mitigating factors. For example, they've lived here all their life. They've not failed to appear for court. So the likelihood is that they're going to appear for their court dates. Those are the kinds of things, as opposed to somebody that's transient, has no home. We can't even mail them something that shows in. So that might be a case where bail should be set to ensure their appearance.
Right, understand. It's all set to make sure that they return.
Return, yeah.
Absolutely. Here's an interesting question. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a case that you presided over and wondered if you could have done it differently? Do you ever have a case like that?
Well, I've had cases like that. It's pretty rare because I usually try to prepare my cases in advance, have a feel for maybe the way I'm going. I still want to hear from the lawyers, and I look at their briefs and so forth, and generally have an idea what I want to do. At this level court, the complexity is nowhere near what it was in the U.S. immigration courts, where you're dealing with everything from asylum to torture cases to national security cases. It's just the federal law, the overlay is very complex. But I've had cases where I perhaps second-guessed myself, or where I've caught it in the middle of the night and the next day been able to address some concerns that I woke up thinking about.
Interesting, very interesting. Let's talk about your mentors in life, or who do you see as your judicial role models?
Well, my mentors, my parents were great mentors. My father was with London Police, and then worked for Scotland Police, and then immigrated here after he met an American who convinced him to come over and check things out. When I started, I was in Bellevue District Court. There were two what I felt were outstanding judges. One was Judge Joel Rindahl. And Judge Rindahl was the type of judge that expected you to comply with the rules and the processes. And if he asked you after you've made an argument, do you have authority for that? Or what rule are you referring to? You better have an answer. So after a steady dose of that, I found that experience alone was great for me as a mentor. The other judge was a guy named Brian Gain. And Brian was really good with people. If people got upset in the courtroom at each other and those types of things, he had a way of calming it and kind of working through it. So those two judges were my mentors for about 5 years, and I found they were very influential. And I've been involved with a statewide association. I taught at the Judicial College. I've been involved in various boards and committees, and throughout that period of time I've come to appreciate judges. For example, Gary Alexander, he was a former Chief Justice, and he has been in contact with me, and I've always appreciated his wisdom and guidance.
Very good. What does Judge Robert McSeveney and his wife Lori like to do when you're not in the courtroom?
Well, we enjoy the neighborhood, so to speak, exploring Wenatchee and, going up to Chelan or Leavenworth and those types of things. We have guests, we like to bring them out, show them the area. We both ride motorcycles. I was, for about 4 years, I was on motorcycles in Bellevue. So we just recently were down. Lori rode up from California by herself.
Wow.
And I met her down in Oregon, and we rode, we just had a pleasant ride back. So we enjoy doing that. We got some pets. We enjoy our pets. And my son is a lawyer here, so we enjoy doing things with him.
Judge Robert McSeveney is looking to be retained in the upcoming election, so he's looking for your vote. And I'm going to give you the last word. Judge McSeveney, what is it about yourself that you would like our viewers to know about you? Well,
I'd like the community to know that I am a very committed judge. I am probably the only candidate with any significant judicial experience. I've been a judge for 23 years at the federal level. I've received numerous awards, and I'm very committed here. When the governor appointed me, he noted my broad experience, and I'm very proud of what I'm able to accomplish. I would encourage people to look at my website, because I've set out pretty much my career there. Cases that I've ruled on, cases that have gone through the appellate courts, state and federal courts, so you have some idea of how I am as a judge. Because that's important. If you're going to vote for a judge, you need to have some history, some background that this person is even qualified. And so I would encourage you to look at my website. I've been endorsed by about 118 judges statewide that know me. I've taught those kinds of things. And my background, I think, can be very helpful when you make those kinds of decisions.
Very good. Well, we wish you the best of luck going forward. And again, you have a website, so you can learn more about Judge Robert McSeveney there. And of course, we will be posting this interview to our website at NCWLIFE.com. For now, that will be it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve, for your time.
You bet, Judge.